Guten Woch. Welcome to the newsman, the Yankee of Halacha Ladarke. So, Bez Hashem, Matzah Shabbos, and as the days get a bit shorter, I'll be able to start a little bit earlier to make it easier for people to go to Malav Malchus v'chol. So let's go straight to our first question. And that is about why Chabad does not say Megillas Koheles. So here you have a letter. This is what the person who asked me the question sent me. So it's a letter addressed to Rabbi Krinsky. How many years ago? That's 50 years ago? No, 40 years ago. Whatever. 50 years ago, yeah. If you have the time, I greatly appreciate your telephoning me. I understand that Chabad has discontinued the reading of Shir HaShirim on Passover, Ruth on Shavuot, and Kohelet on Sukkot. Is that correct? If it is, what is the reason? So it's a rather strong-worded question that Chabad has discontinued the practice. So Rabbi Krinsky obviously showed the letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responds, number one, with a question mark, exclamation mark, circling the word discontinued. Me'olam le'nohagu kein b'Chabad, u'be'od kamo v'kamo, that this is not as if we have discontinued. It's something which it's never been an issue. It's never been a customary in Chabad, and not only in Chabad but also in other communities. Also, it has not been customary. And then, in brackets, the Rebbe says, "Haprotim etzel Rabbonei Anash.org." For more details, you should ask Rabbonei Chabad. Okay, so now I was put in a bit of a position that I have to find an answer. Someone asks such a question. I'm going to disappoint you. I don't have any major giluyim on this. What I'm going to share with you is we have from the Minhagei Chabad, written by the late Rabbi Shua Monshein. So the minhag of saying the Megillas, Shir HaShirim on Pesach, etc., this is something which is minhag Ashkenaz. It's mentioned in the Ramo, in Hilchos Pesach and Hilchos Sukkah. So the Rabbi Yosef doesn't mention it. I'm not sure whether the Sfardim have this minhag or not. I didn't manage to establish that. But I did see that it is mentioned in the Abu Darham, which is obviously a Sfardish Sefer. So that's the first point, that it is mentioned in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch as minhag. Noah gives a minhag. Reb Chaim Noah, who lived some 70 years ago, about, 65. So he notes that according to the Chabad minhag, we don't learn Shir HaShirim and the other Megillas. And then he further notes that in the point Gimel, there are some Chassidish communities which do read Shir HaShirim, not in a public way, but each one on their own. But as our minhag, and that's also the Polish minhag of Ger and other groups, that there's no set minhag of reading Shir HaShirim on Pesach. And then he has in Vishnitz, they do Shir HaShirim. This is really on Pesach rather than Shavuos. But this minhag of reading the Megillas is not so established in the Chassidish community, which, though, I'm not satisfied with all of this, because we are Ashkenazim, and so I'm trying to picture what happened, how did it happen? If Chassidim originally were some like Ashkenazi Shiiten, and then there was a switchover. That they stopped saying Shira and these Megillas Barabim. The Rebbe is suggesting that there were Ashkenazi communities which never had it also. I'm sure he means Ashkenazi communities. Kolponim, this seems to be a widespread amongst various Kaddish communities that they do not have a kviyas of doing the Megillas in public. Okay, Kolpon, it's not as if it's a new thing on Mendel Safran adds, he was in Ger on Shabbos Chalamed, and they didn't say Keheles or Animus Miris. Okay, let's move on. Next question we have is about ice cubes. Oh, sorry, the crock pot. Okay, yeah. So the question is, on Shabbos morning, I see that the cholent in the crock pot needs more water. May I lift the ceramic pot off the metal base, bring it to the Shabbos urn to top up the cholent with water, and then return the pot to the base without setting it down? So what we have here is what's called in halacha terms chazorah. To take, all right, so let's explain. To take cold water and put it into the cholent is absolutely forbidden because you'd be cooking the cold water. Comes to mind now, when I was a bocher in Kfar Chabad, we had a shiur from Rav Grossman, Rav Yisrael Grossman, Alav Shalom, and he told a story how on a Shabbos morning, in Eretz Yisrael, people have these dod shemesh, these solar heaters, and someone had taken a glass of water from the dod shemesh, from the solar heated water, and put it into the cholent. And he'd asked the child whether he did the right or the wrong thing, and Rav Grossman had said that solar cooking is not called cooking. And therefore, when you let it in, when you poured in hot solar heated water into a cholent, instantaneously you cooked it. And so you were over of cooking on Shabbos, and he said you're not allowed to eat the cholent. That was with the solar. Now, taking water from taking water from the urn and putting it into the cholent. So really what it is you're taking hot food away from the source of heat and putting it back, albeit into a different pot. Before it was in the urn, now it will be in the cholent pot. But it's basically what you've done is chazara. Now, in order to be allowed to do chazara, so one of the conditions is that the fire has to be kugrufa uktumo. It has to be a suppressed fire. So in the times of Chazal, I would mean raking out any embers in the stove, or it would mean scattering soot or ash on the embers. So there's a statement of distancing that you don't intend to awaken up these coals, these embers. That's what we do with a blech. We cover the fire, and that's the blech, which we cover the fire, is a statement that we're not going to try to revive the fire, make it any bigger. That's what the blech is for. Nowadays, probably most of us have switched from blechs to which cover the stove to one of these plug-in things. But again, these are a statement that we're not cooking, we're just keeping food warm. And so this is the equivalent of the blech, and so therefore chazorah is permitted. Chazorah is permitted. Now we're reading from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Siman Reish Nun Gimel. Several conditions. One is oide beyodai, that if you will take a cholent off, you want to put it back, let's say, so it has to be that you're still holding the pot. Another thing is that you shouldn't, the moshel, if you took a pot of soup and you want to now pour it into a small pot and put that smaller pot back onto the blech, that would not be allowed according to the Alter Rebbe, because one of the conditions of chazorah is it has to be in it should not have been put into a different container. That's because the second container is cold, it's like off the fire, it's like a new beginning. Here, in the case of pouring water into the cholent, so you're taking it from the urn, which is a kli rishon, and you're putting it into the cholent, which is a kli rishon, and therefore that is allowed. The problem here is about using a glass or cup. Are you allowed to pour from the urn into a cup and then take that cup of hot water and pour it into the urn? Now, I want to clarify something. This line of Lo Pina Tav Shel K'dei Acheres is a discussion in the Gemara Perek Hiro, in Gemara Shabbos, and it's a question which is not resolved. And the Alter Rebbe takes the stricter view that if you to move it into a different container, you wouldn't be allowed to put it back. The Mishnah Berurah takes the more lenient view, and he says you are allowed to. So according to the Mishnah Berurah, it would be okay to pour from the urn into a glass and use that glass to pour into the cholent. According to the Alter Rebbe, that wouldn't be okay, because once you've reduced it from Kli Rishon to Kli Sheni, you wouldn't be allowed to put it back into a Kli Rishon. So that's what that would be an issue. So now let's come back. So in order now we talk about a crock pot. Nowadays there's a metal outer housing, and then there's an inside ceramic insert, and the cholent sits in the ceramic insert. And you want to take out the ceramic insert, and you want to bring it onto the urn, and then you want to put it back. So then you need to have the equivalent of a blech. So what I told this person is you're going to have to put a thin layer of silver foil inside the housing. So that should be like a cover over the that should be a cover to the normal way of cooking. When these removable inserts came on the market about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there was a discussion, perhaps it's called hatmona. Perhaps the housing is so close to the ceramic insert that it's considered like it's been wrapped by Dover HaMoshev Hevel, and I believe Reb Shlomo Zalman was actually machbir, but generally it's been accepted that you can use them, and it's because there's a little bit of space between the housing and the ceramic. Okay, but if you put too much silver foil, too many layers of silver foil, then actually you're getting into a problem of atmona, because there's going to be no space, no air space between. So that's why it's just be a thin layer of just one layer of silver foil would be enough. Now then raises another question: if the cholent is fleshy and the urn you like to keep parav because you want to also use the hot water for a coffee with milk. So that raises now another question. So we've gone from Arachai, we now go on to Yeridea. So this does raise a problem. Now, in the lower part, you have here a quote from the Sefer Shabbos Kahalocha of from Rabbi Kosiel Forkash, because Alter Rebbe, which you see here, doesn't really address so clearly about moving water into adding to the cholent. It's not so clear in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. Just talk about Chazorah putting the same thing back. So that's why I quoted from Rav Forkash, and this is a generally accepted thing, also Shmir Shabbos Kolchoso, about pouring, but he emphasizes, like I said, Yishpech Yeshirus Mehamechem, the Tech Hakdeira, Shoimedes Al Haish. You should pour directly from the urn into the pot of cholent, which then, in his Sefer, he also has a discussion, what about the Milchik Fleish, about the Fleishik Parav question. So what he suggests is that there should be a distance, vertical distance, between the cholent and the urn, so that the steam of the cholent, the rising steam of the cholent, shouldn't reach up to the tap of the urn. I'm not sure how you're going to work that out. And what I've suggested to others is that if the lid, let's say, of your pot of cholent, or in this case of your crock pot, if your lid hasn't got any little holes, as sometimes lids of pots do have, but if you take that lid and turn it upside down, it becomes like a little keli. So, but it doesn't really give off much steam. So if you wanted to add water to your cholent and to avoid the problem of rising steam, take the lid of the cholent or the lid of the crock pot turn it upside down, use that and it's got the quality and the status of Kli Rishon. Use that to fill up as much hot water as you need, and then use that for pouring into your cholent. Okay, let's go on to the next point. Next question, and that was about making ice cubes. So let's go ask the more basic question. Is there an issue of making ice cubes on Shabbos? Now, in Gemara, they don't talk about making ice cubes on Shabbos, but they do talk about taking ice and making it into liquid, into water. And there they have an issue of moilid, or creating like a new entity. Before it was ice and now it's water. So there's different opinions there about whether it means even, one says, even if you just left ice in an empty container, an empty jug, just ice, and the water and the ice dissolved into water, you wouldn't be allowed to drink that water on Shabbos because it's noilad. Another opinion says it's only if you actually, the issue is only when you actually start stirring it with a beater of some sort, that you are manually making it into water. Be that as it may, there is an issue of dissolving ice. So the Chibina Rov, in Koichav Miyakov, so he raised in a problem with making ice on Shabbos, that it's if there's an issue to make from ice into water, it follows that there should also be an issue for making water into ice. So the Chibina Rov is like the first, I think, one of them, probably one of the most prominent voices to object to making ice on Shabbos. And the consensus later poskim disagreed with him. And the way Moshe Shmuel Shabbos Kol Chasa writes, if it's not necessary, if there's a great need for running out of ice, it's very important, then you would be allowed to make ice, but it's something which one preferably would avoid. That's talking about Shabbos. I just actually received a journal called Pa'olim LaTorah, and I saw an interesting comment that B'Shem Baruch Shimon, who was a son-in-law of the Chibina Rov, the Chibina Rov also didn't mean it with full. He just saw there was a problem of some other michshel. He raised it as an issue, but not that he was totally convinced that it's also to make ice on Shabbos, which is an interesting piece of information. But now we're dealing with Yom Tov. And I said to someone, tell me, to take flour and mix it into with eggs and put it into an oven and make a cake, you are allowed to on Yom Tov. And to put water into a fridge, into a freezer, to make ice, you're making a new thing. And flour into a cake is not making a new thing. I found it very difficult to accept, just on pure balabatish svara, to say that you can't make ice and you are allowed to make a cake. All right, it's not practical to make cakes nowadays. We're, Baruch Hashem, we've got all the machinery to make it easier in the weekdays. But you could, al Pidyon, you're allowed to make a cake on Yom Tov. So meanwhile, I'm looking here at Siman Tov Kuf Yud Aleph in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, and talking about the inyan of using incense and burning incense on Yom Tov in order to impregnate. So to impregnate a fragrance to garments on Yom Tov is not allowed, or just even to burn incense in a house is not allowed on Yom Tov. The reason for this is because the melachos on Yom Tov are only permitted if they are l'chol nefesh, as it says in the Torah, ach asher ye'ochel l'chol nefesh. So it has to be hanoah shov l'chol nefesh. Burning incense was not called a hanoah shov l'chol nefesh, which is, I want to just throw in a very interesting comment. We know that on Shabbos we're not meant to take medicines for a minor condition. Why not? You might come to grind. On Yom Tov, you might think, well, Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook food, so why can't you take medicines freely on Yom Tov? So the answer is no. Medicine is not a hanoah shov l'chol nefesh. Making medicine you wouldn't be allowed to make on Yom Tov, because it's not a hanoah shov l'chol nefesh. It's not that everyone likes to have aspirin every day. It's not shov l'chol nefesh. You wouldn't be allowed to. And because of that, you're not allowed to take medicines on Yom Tov unless it's for the same as Shabbos. The second day of Yom Tov, you can take medicines freely. The issue of taking medicines on Yom Tov is for Yom Tov Sheni is suspended. You're allowed to take medicines on the second day of Yom Tov. But the first day, the same as Shabbos. Let's come back to our point. Now here the Alter Rebbe talks about, in this seif, using fragrance to impregnate a fragrance into food. He says like this. Osul ashein peres, kadesha yikretu reyach haboisem. You're allowed to impregnate a flavor, which is going to make the food more tasty. If your purpose is only to give a fragrance to the food, that you're not allowed to. As he says, the fish also you're not allowed to impregnate a fragrance, whether to a garment or to food, on Yom Tov. It's got a resemblance to Malacha. And even though Malachas are mutter letzorich achila, but since creating this fragrance is not a tzorich eichel nefesh kol kach, ve'einu shova bakoil, it's not a kind of benefit which is enjoyed across the board. Therefore, you're not allowed to do it on Yom Tov. So again, to impregnate a fragrance along with a flavor to food is permitted because it's oichel nefesh. To impregnate a flavor, just a fragrance, and you're not interested in the flavor, that would not be okay. So to be moilid if it is oichel nefesh, then moilid is permitted. Okay, very good. If moilid is permitted for oichel nefesh, so I'm allowed to make ice cubes. Yeah, I think it's very, very straightforward. Once you tell me that moilid is permitted letzorich achila, then you're allowed to make ice cubes. And here on the side you have from the Piskei Teshuvos, he talks about it. He brings various poskim, and he makes this connection. If you see here, by 48, that they say it's not a problem to make ice, and he quotes here Al Pi HaMizbayer, Shulchan Aruch Harav. Some mistake there. It says should, it should be Shulchan Aruch Harav in Tafkuf Yud Aleph Sif Zayin and Kuntres Achron. So to make ice cubes on Yom Tov, I feel is definitely not a problem. Let's go on to our next question. So now coming back to Rahmana De'ana, and if you remember, we were discussing about why is it in the Slichus for why is it in the Slichus on Atanis and not in the Slichus or before Rosh Hashanah? So I actually made a mistake that looking in other Slichus, it is there. So you have this piece, Misha Honor Lavram Avinu, Misha Honor Yitzchak, Misha Honor, the whole list of Misha Honor. At the end, in other Slichus, it then continues after Misha Honor Cholat Tzadikim, Cholat Tamimim, Harachamonu de Honor. So it's there. And that's in all the Slichus, non-Chabad Slichus Jesor, the Hemshech too, in continuation from Misha Honor, goes into Rachmona de Honor, which you can think, if you think of the words, it's a natural follow-on. Take a look in Chabad Slichus, after Misha Honor, L'chol HaTzadikim HaYesharim, skips. And this is not my discovery. I noticed that Rabbi Monshein in his Yoetz Omer Minhagei Chabad, after the Rebbe says that our Slichus is based upon Nusach, Lita, Reis, and V'zamut, he says, but I notice there's a few differences between Chabad Nusach and Nusach, Lita, Reis, and V'zamut. So now I'm intrigued. Our Slichus are following Nusach Lita, and here Rachmana de Honor is omitted. Now, what's the difference between the Slichus by Atanis and the Slichus before Rosh Hashanah? The difference is, in the Slichus by Atanis, you've already said Tachnun earlier. You say Tachnun, and then you go into Slichus. Slichus before Rosh Hashanah, so then there's Tachnun at the end of the Slichus. Although in Chabad it says, Ein Neuflin al Pneim, Remendel, in Minag Lieds, in the Nefilas Apayim. Yeah. So the Welt has Nefilas Apayim over here. So, and then it goes Machiomas. Okay, but coming back to our point, what happened? Why did Chabad take out this Rachmana de Honor, and the Rebbe restored it by singing it afterwards, but not in the Slichus? I mean, it's a mystery. So whilst I was looking around, I came across the following piece from Reb Pinchas Koritzer. The Pinchas Koritzer is a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe, and the famous story where he comes to the Magid is a title of a page of Chassidus Valgerenzach, and he was very upset, and the Alter Rebbe made a whole moshul with the pearl, with the gems from the crown of the king. That whole story starts with the Pinchas Koritzer. So the Pinchas Koritzer, there's several Sforim. There's Lekuta Pinchas, I think. There's Imri Pinchas, and then there's Neufes Tzufim. This concept actually comes up in all three. How do I know? Because the computer found it in all three. But it's a very similar content. In fact, several comments about slichas. So I'm going to read inside. Be'inyan haslichas, shebetchila oimrim psukim shel shevach. Start the slichas with ashrei, which are words of praise, as it says in the Gemara, that le'olam yesape odom shivcha shel mokim, v'achar kach yispal. You start first with the praise, and then you go first. The first three brachas are praise, and and then you have atachoyne, and you ask for chanoinu mitcha. Then he goes on, v'hu yichud havaya v'adni, ki tefila hu malchus, v'lochein oimim shivcha shel mokim, v'achar kach, because the seder in tefillah is first praise, and then supplication. So too in the slichas. There it starts off with Ashrei Shivcha Shel Mokim, then there's the slichas. Now, then he adds another point. V'hayichud tzorech liyus al yedei mesirus nefesh. We're talking about this yichud, which you mentioned before, requires a degree of mesirus nefesh. Lekach noiflin al pnei macha haslichas. That's why towards the end of slichas, there's nefilas apayim, like we do it every day in Tachnun. Did I miss out something? No. So if you read it, this is also brought in Chabad Chassidus. You have the various levels of davening, and Shemon Esrei is oimed lifnei hamelech, but Nefilas Apayim is in Chassidus, is a Kapoling Chassidus is keilu meis al Kiddush Hashem. That is the level of awareness or commitment, or whatever you want, whatever word you want to use. The Nefilas Apayim is a moment of total Mesiras Nefesh. And therefore, he says, just like you have that after Shmona Esrei Nefilas Apayim, you have the same thing at the end of the Slichas, you have Nefilas Apayim. That is, perhaps, that is the most extreme moment of the Slichas. Then lekach, v'achar kach, after having had nefilas apayim, maschilim mitato li'elo, then we go from below upwards. Therefore, after the slichas, after nefilas apayim, then there's machi or maseh. Ki nefilas apayim mesiras nefesh lemisa mamish, because nefilas apayim is like he's ready to mamish, giving his life for Kiddush Hashem. Targum b'gematria tardemo shu echad mishishim b'misa, like Targum is like a slumber, and therefore you're waking up a little bit. And you have the Machnise Rachamim, because the Malach HaShores won't deal with Targum. But then he says you go back to Targum, which he doesn't explain that. But let's come back then. What the Pinchas Koritzer is saying, Tachnun, you got Slichas, and the most intense part of the slichas is this part over here, which is nefilas apayim. Kavona meisa atzma lemisa. Once you are in that extreme, then comes the targum. That explains why it doesn't belong. The targum before doesn't belong there. It's fakir. The targum is after the mesiras nefesh lemisa in nefilas apayim, then starts going up Tardemo, Targum, and then you go up, then again you get to the Malochim, because they won't deal with the Targum, however you deal with it. But what I find fascinating here is, and if someone out there can corroborate or is this is it only Chabad? Are there any other Chassidish Shlichus? What's so strange is that a Chabad minhag should be based upon a shtickle Torah in Pinchas Koritzer's Sforim. Nicht gefährlich, but they all got from the same source. As I have another fascinating story about the Pinchas Koritzer with the Rebbe, but perhaps another time. because I didn't prepare the screen for it. But if someone Dafka wants next week, I will share this story of Reb Pinchas Koritzer and Meister Min Rebbe. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I have now two questions about Geirim. Number one, I was asked the question: does a Giyores who gave birth, does the child require a Pidyon haben? No. So of course your mind starts thinking. It says Kol Peter Rechem BeYisrael. So you might have thought, oh, Giyores, is that called Peter Rechem BeYisrael? So here you have in Shulchan Aruch, it's in Machine Hay, in Dinim Pidyon haben, talks about a shivcha which was released on a woman who was a nochris, who was misgayer, and even if they were pregnant when they were megayer, then the child requires a Pidyon haben. Shenemar kol Peter kol rechem bivnei Yisrael, v'hari potur rechem b'Yisrael. So when we say Peter rechem b'Yisrael, bivnei Yisrael, if she was Jewish at the time when the baby was born, so then it's called a Peter rechem, and there's a chiyuv Pidyon. Now, in the Taz, I think it is, on the side, which you see on the top of the page, and this is to exclude from the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Haglili, who says that if a woman, what would happen if this Giyores had a baby before she was Megayer? So Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, well, this is the first Peter Rechem b'Yisrael. And the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Again, Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, gave a birth before, it doesn't count. Now it's her first birth as a Yiddish lady. The halacha disagrees with that. The halacha is that if she had given birth before, so then it's not called a Peter Rechem. But if this is her first child, she never even had a miscarriage, so then it's called, and she gives birth, then there is a chiyuv of Pidyon haben. Let's go on. So then another question someone asked me, especially Thursday night, is there a Geir, his mother passed away, is there anything which Torah would kind of recognize that he can do in the merit of his father? And my gut reaction was, there's nothing to talk about, because Geshen is that guy, but doing my job honestly is that before you paskin, you have to check up. And so I did a read of research, and I have a sefer called Oitzer Kibud of Aim. So it's one of those specialists forum, and this is where this quote is from. And you have here several Sforim who do condone a Geir saying Kaddish for a parent who wasn't Jewish. And it is perhaps a little bit surprising if you can say Kaddish along with other people, it's not so obvious, but they various Sforim do allow it. Now, then, towards the end of the third column, Shuli Hadvorim, he says, I want to make a point though. In Sefer Chasidim, he says, Geir ha'mevakesh al over ve'imoi lo yoyel lehokel midino. If he wants to daven that they should have an easier time in the world of truth, it's not going to be any effect. So does that fit with what we've just said? And the answer could be that when the person was a wicked person and deserves punishment for wicked deeds, then for this child who's a Geir to daven for them will be to no avail. But if they were doing what a good goy should be doing, and they were supportive, etc., so then what we're seeing here is that they will be helped by the fact that their offspring, their biological offspring, will be bringing greater Kedushas Hashem in the world. That will be for the deceased deceased goy, will be a merit for them in Olam Ha'emes. So fascinating, but you can look it up. If someone wants me to send it to them by email, let me know and I'll forward it to you. All right. Now, here we have a question which one of our regular listeners had. It was a Simchas Torah morning, and on Simchas Torah morning, there's a job to to sweep up the worn out slippers, the pantoffel from Kamenetz and from the whole story of the Baal Shem Tov, where the Malachim came to the shul and they saw the morning after, the morning of Simchas Torah, all these worn out shoes. And so the people are being, so the day after, the morning after Simchas Torah, so some people might be a little bit late. And then we have Birchas Koyanim. And Birchas Koyanim is not at Musaf. That's because Minig Yisrael is to have a Kaddish before Hakofas, before Kriyas HaTorah. And by a Kaddish, you might have a little bit more than a revius of wine. And therefore the Koyanim, to avoid the shaila of duchening when they are inebriated, so the Koyanim do duchening at Shacharis. Now, in case you have a question when this started, is this we're going back to the other one, this question, is it Chabad Minig? It actually is quoted in the Levush. Levush is going back about 400 years ago. So it seems to be a well-established minig of making Birchas Koyanim is done at Shacharis because of the Kiddush before Hakofas on Simchas Torah Beidei. So now the question is that our Yedidenu, he's a little bit behind the minyan. He's a Birchas Krishma. They are on for Birchas Koyanim. Does he answer the Birchas Koyanim? And the answer is that we've got three levels. We've got a level of minhag, we've got a level of din, and we've got a level called Dover Shebikdusha. Answering Baruch Hu Baruch Shmo is minhag. Answering an omen on a bracha, on a regular bracha, someone makes a bracha on an apple, to answer omen is a din, to answer omen. Then we've got those in Yonim, which are Dover Shebikdusha, which are only, can only be done with a minyan. So Kedusha, Baruch Hu, Kriyas HaTorah. So these things which are called Dover Shebikdusha have got the most powerful status that even in Birchas Krishma you'll answer those things. So if you're Birchas Krishma and they're saying Kedusha, you join in for Kedusha, just the essentials. Baruch Kaddish, Baruch Yimlech. Moedim, you'll say Moedim Anash.org, and Baruch Hu, you'll answer Baruch Hu. And similarly, Birchas Koyanim can only be done with a minyan. And therefore, to answer Omen for the Birchas Koyanim is a Dover Shebikdusha, and therefore you can answer Omen for the Birchas Koyanim. Interesting that what I've got here in front of you is a quote from the Sefer Ishi Yisrael, which is a Sefer specializing on Tefillah. And he has a question, what about the Bracha Asher Kitshona B'Kedushosa Shel Aaron? And he's not so sure about that. Now, it's very interesting because when someone has an aliyah and they say, you do answer Omen because it's called a Dover Shebikdusha. So why is the bracha, which the Kohen says before he says, the Birchas Koyanim, that's also only a Dover Shebikdusha, but it's slightly different because there he says that there the main thing is that's the main Dover Shebikdusha. He's saying the bracha. Here the Birchas HaMitzvahs is like a sideshow. The main thing is the Birchas Koyanim itself. So anyway, the Birchas Koyanim itself, definitely you answer Amen. The Asheket Shon B'Mitzvos Just Shel Aaron B'Yava. Here he raises a little bit of a doubt on that. So now someone asks, does the Chazan for Musaf on Simchas Torah say Birchas Koyanim? The answer is yes. It does say Birchas Koyanim. Perhaps I should share it. I got a question which I didn't want to put on the thing. Is pouring water on the Chazan the issur of washing the talis on Shabbat on Yom Tov? I said I'm shocked at the question. Person is davening Oimid Lifnei HaMelech, and you're pouring water on his head. I just found it, But he said that it's not so uncommon. But so I didn't address that question. But meanwhile, what I have seen is that the Chazan says the Alekenu V'Kei V'Seinu, and very often some Simchas Torah people join them. They make a kind of. There is obviously a certain degree of Nilsa Dibdi Chusa. And one thing which I remember is Tovshin Lamed Ches. Tovshin Lamed Ches, there was the Farbrengen. The Rebbe had Tangedacht, and it was Simchas Torah the afternoon. There was a Farbrengen, and there was a Farbrengen by the regular place where the Rebbe's Farbrengen would be, but the Rebbe wasn't there. The Rebbe was in his room, and Reb Shlomo Aaron Kazanovsky spoke then. And Shlomo Aaron Kazanovsky was about 80 years old at the time, and he was very well proportioned. And he spoke, and he said that the day before, or in the morning, sorry, he had Chazaka every year. He was chazen by the Rebbe for Musaf or something, and every time they would do Eis Shalom, they would turn him over. But because this morning he had davened in the Rebbe's, just outside the Rebbe's room, and so therefore they didn't turn him over. And therefore he insisted that the Farbrengen downstairs, that they should turn him over for Eis Shalom. So it just tells me that the turning over the Chazan for Eis Shalom is an alta minig. I don't think it's exclusive to Chabad, but he insisted not to be mevater on the schus of being turned over for Eis Shalom. Okay, let's go on. Someone asks me about why are we using the opportunity of Birchas Kohanim, such as Eis Rotzen. Why is it the time for talking about dreams? So I wanted to say two things. Number one, dreams are very, well, a lot of dreams are garnished, yeah? But sometimes dreams are significant. And sometimes a dream is a message from another level, and the dream has got a powerful message. I just want to share with you a Dover Nifla. When my son Mendel got engaged, so the night before we went to the oil, I met my mechutner, Rabbi Alprin of Brazil. And the first thing, I'd never really spoken to him before. But he asked me, did you learn in a kollel in London? So I said, yes. I said, why do you ask? So his mother had passed away some 6 years earlier, and he often had dreams where his mother would come and speak to him. When my son Mendel was in Brazil, meeting with the Kala, so on Shabbos morning, Yossi Alprin has a dream, and he says he's his mother. And his mother, he says, Mama, do you know we have something happening in the house? What's going on? So he says that the daughter, Chaya, she's meeting with a bocher. What's the bocher's name? His name is Mendel Raskin, and from London. So in the dream, his mother says to him, he is son of Itcher Raskin, who was sent by the Rebbe to be a shliach in a kollel in London. Now, he had never known, he didn't know me as Itcher Raskin, he didn't know about the kollel, didn't know anything about it. And she had asked him, that was the first thing he asked me when he met us Mechutonim, did you learn kollel in London? Now, here you have in front of you a letter from the Rebbe when I came back to London after being a couple of years in kollel, and I wanted to continue learning, and there was no Chabad framework. And I'd asked the Rebbe about learning in one of the local kollelim. So here you see on the screen, in response to your question, you should learn in a kollel which is a suitable kollel in your town. Masim gamboze in brackets, suitable also in this future. You should be able to continue your holy work in the Chabad institutions in town. This is the letter. All right. So I'm coming back. So he had a dream about him. So I'm just giving you one example of many, and everyone knows stories about messages coming through dreams. So dreams are a powerful thing, and sometimes people do get anxious. And so Birchas Kohanim is okay. So now here you have interesting piece from the Sefer Noam Elimelech, a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe. And he talks about the inyan of Samach and Mem v'Samach shebeluchos b'nes hoyu oimdim, and he goes to a whole discussion because it says by Truma that mido ayin yofer, if you're a generous person, you give echad mi'arboim. If you are a stingy person, ayin ra, you give echad mishishim. You got Mem and Samach. And he connects it with Mem Samach, and he says the two types of tzaddikim. If you're mingy, why are you giving anything? No, there's two types of tzaddikim. There's a tzaddik who deals with only with the good, and the tzaddik who is ayin ra means he deals with the bad. So there we have. Romaz l'hatza ayin ra is a remes for the tzaddik who looks at to sweeten the dinim roim, the evil, and that's it. Which means echad mishishim, the idea of bittul b'shishim. Al derech the isa b'sefer. Why do we say b'bichas kohanim the ribeinu shalolim chaloim cholamti? What's got to do with dreams with bichas kohanim? And the answer is shahachaloim hu echad mishishim b'nevuah, because a dream is 1/60 of prophecy, and the kohanim is nevuah, is kulei nevuah, and that's why you're not allowed to look at the kohanim because the shechina is on their hands, and therefore we say the ribeinu shalolim at bichas kohanim to annul the chaloim in 60. The chen tzaddik who's able to sweeten dinim, he is sweetening them in their shoyrish. V'nim tzoyim b'teilim b'shishim. So he's saying that this idea of bittul b'shishim, fascinating. About 10 years ago, a bit more, was published in the Kfar Chabad magazine that someone had found a Noam Elimelech which belonged to the Mittel Rebbe. And there's 10 comments, 10 remarks of the Mittel Rebbe on the Noam Elimelech. And one of them is a comment of this piece, where the Mittel Rebbe adds, Kishishim oisius bebichas koyanim. In Birchas Koyanim, Yavrecha Chayor Yisa, the 60 letters. And the 60 letters is lending itself to the idea of Bittul B'Shishim. And so if there's some evil which needs to be gotten rid of, it should be Bittul B'Shishim. That's the connection here. Just to throw in, that's why we also say by night, by Chishim Shalamito, Hinei Mitosa Shel Shlomo, Shishim Gebayim Sof Bivlo. That's 2 psukim there, which each has got 20, together is 20 words. We say it 3 times, so you got 60 words. That's again the Shishim Giborim. The Shishim Giborim alludes to the 60 letters of Birchas Kohanim. Also, the Yoshev V'Seiser, called Shir Shel Begoyim, Tila Ke'at Hashem Machsi, is 60 words. And again, it's there, the Shir Shel Begoyim means it's to ward off harm. So again, the idea of 60 is to ward off a negative inyan. And just want to remind you also in Tov Shin Nun Beis, at the beginning of Chodesh Adar Rishon, the Rebbe spoke about it. There's 2 months of Adar, and they got 60 days, and he was trying to invoke the inyan of Bittul B'Shishim. And then there was the tragedy with Mrs. Lapine, and then there was afterwards was Chav Zayin Adar. But the Rebbe was trying to to invoke the concept of Bittul B'Shishim. So to summarize, why do we say the Rebbeinu Shalom of Bittul, evil of Chaloimus at Bichas Kohanim? Because there is this power of Shishim which is able to be mevatel an undesirable phenomenon. Okay, we're running a bit low on time, but we have another couple of minutes. Okay, so here this shayla is from a nephew of mine who's in Australia, and just before we go further, so you asked about Musaf and why is it different to Mincha? Musaf is a seder of we follow the normal seder that you have Birchas Kohanim, and we don't. We just on Simchas Torah you'll just the Chazan just says it without the Kohanim. By Mincha, it's in other words, Mincha is a Zman Shikrus. It's after the meal, and therefore it's normal for people to have drunk a bit of wine. Therefore, we don't have Birchas Kohanim by Mincha. Musaf, you're saying Musaf on Simchas Torah, possibly in Svara, you're right, it should have been missed out, but we're not going to start tampering on our own. Yeah. Okay, so now coming back to this question from Australia, here's a Chassidish Geman, a Lomdish Geman, and he wants to see, there's no minyanim there. It's you can't get more than 5 people together. It's a crazy situation. But meanwhile, he wants to be able to use a mikveh for Tfilas Ezra. So he bought a large tank. And these have in the loft, sometimes people have these water tanks, something like that. And he cut out a hole of it in the bottom and put it in somewhere in I guess where there's a stone floor, and glued, put in some cement in this way to Is it okay? So here, let's take a look. This is from the Alter Rebbe's Takonos HaMikveh. Now, just to fill you in, we know that the Alter Rebbe, towards the end of his life, he said that there are three things which he believes are special zchuyos, special merits, which he has, and one of them is that he introduced warm mikvahs. And to explain, the mikveh in the olden times would typically be built near a river, and they would dig out a hole near the river, and there would be a channel from the water of the river. From the river would fill up the mikveh. And as beautiful as they would make this hole, perhaps even have a hut over it, but the water would be cold. And even if you pour a few kettles of boiling water, it wouldn't keep. Because the ground around it is so cold, so the water wouldn't. And if the water is freezing cold, that means whoever tovels in the mikveh is going to tovel in haste, or not going to the mikveh altogether, or chas v'sholem, or they'll tovel in haste and not do a proper tefillah. So although Chazal said you shouldn't tovel in a hot mikveh, Chazal discouraged tovel in hot mikvahs because they didn't want people to confuse the mikveh with a bath. This is for Tara, this is for hygiene, two separate inyonim. What the Alter Rebbe saw in Russia in his time, with the climate, the weather, especially in the winter, that it was a takona gedola that you should be able to have warm mikvahs. How do you do this? The Alter Rebbe devised a whole system of making a wooden floor, and they're making a wooden crate. And the wooden crate sits on the wooden floor. So you dig out the hole, and then in this hole you put in a wooden floor, and then you put a wooden walls, and then you allow the water from the river to seep through. Once the water is seeped through to a certain level, then you pour in a few kettles of hot water. Now, because the body of water is in wood rather than in earth or in stone, so therefore the water would remain warmer for a more reasonable amount of time. This is the Takonos HaMikveh of the Alter Rebbe. You can look at Shulchan Aruch in the back of Hilchos Nida, is 2 pages. He goes into the details. So here we have one piece. This is a copy from the Sefer of Rebbe Levin, Tikkun Mikvos, but the Lashon is the Alter Rebbe's Lashon. Lahazir ha'umen ha'oiseh ha'tevel. You should caution the craftsman who's building this crate. You don't connect the base to the wall. He actually says you can make a crate with a floor. First, you have a floor built in at the bottom of this pit, but then you'll make this crate. But before you put the floor connected to the walls of this crate, make sure that there should be a large hole in the bottom of this floor. So that should be it should never have had the status of keli. So now someone raised the problem. If you take this large water tank, plastic water tank, it was a keli. The fact that you cut it out, but it was once a keli. So here, why does the Alter Rebbe take this chumrah? So there are rishonim. The Rambam says clearly that this would be kosher. If you take a barrel, cut a hole, put it on the ground, cement it, the Rambam says it's kosher. But the Ravid says it's not okay. And he said, the Ravid and the Rosh and the Ritva, there are several rishonim who say there's 2 issues. One is you're not allowed that a mikveh mustn't be made with water drawn by a bucket. That's called mayim she'uvim. That's possible. But there's another thing, not to tovel in the keli. Ach maynu boy, boy has to be bekarka. Tvila has to be bekarka, not in a keli. So the Ravid maintains that even if you cut a hole in it, it's still called tvila bekeli. So it could be that it's not a valid thing. And now here we have the Alter Rebbe in Siman Peiches, in Cheskrishme. He talks about Tfilas Ezra, and he says that to toivel has to be arboim so bekarka. He adds in brackets that the 40 so to have a Tfilas Ezra has to be in the ground. So this is the taina that taking this barrel, this tank, and cutting out is still not fulfilling because it's not bekarka. I still felt that in the circumstances, first of all, the Shittas Rambam is it's valid. Number two, there is a svara that the fact that you have cut a hole and put in cement, and in that way it's connected to the ground, it should also be counted bekarka, and therefore, of course, it's not a lechatchila situation, but I think in the circumstances as they are, that this would be acceptable. Let's move on. I think I'm going to have to skip that because we're running short on time. I just want to finish off then about Ya'aleh V'Yoveh. And this is one of the benefits of having this Shir Barabim, that if I make a mistake, someone can correct me. So now I was corrected on what I said by the last Shir. I remind you that Sa'ar Bocher asked me, it was the end of Yom Tov, the first days of Yom Tov, on a Wednesday night, and he davened Ma'ariv, and he forgot to say Ya'aleh V'Yoveh in Ritzei. Now, if you forget Ya'aleh V'Yoveh at Ma'ariv on Rosh Chodesh, you don't have to repeat Shemona Esrei. But if you forget Ya'aleh V'Yoveh at Ma'ariv, you do have to repeat Shemona Esrei. This boy, he had forgotten Ya'aleh V'Yoveh in Ritzei. He included it in Moedim. And then he asked the Shaila, is he Yotze or does he have to repeat the Shemona Esrei? And I told him he has to repeat. And so someone, Reb Meir Zerkin, I've mentioned his name several times, he directed me to the Sefer Tehillah LeDavid. It was a Rav Barditchev, and he kocht sich stark in the Alter Rebbe. And what we're seeing in various places, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch actually, in the end of Hilchos Pesach, that let's say when you have Yom Tov and Shabbos together, people get confused. And let's say you didn't do the ending, Baruch Ham Kaddish Shabbos Yisrael Azman. You just said Kaddish Yisrael Azman. If you mentioned Shabbos somewhere in the middle, that's good enough. Or if you mentioned, you only said, let's say it's on a Yom Tov, and you didn't do the Yom Tov davening, you did the Shabbos davening. But you said Ya'aleh V'Yoveh as if it was Chol HaMoed, and you mentioned the Yom Tov. So what we're seeing here is that if you mentioned the Yom Tov or the Shabbos, or even if it wasn't in the right place, so b'di'evad you are Yotze. So this is where you see that Tehillah LeDavid is writing, Gam Mashma Midvorov is referring to the Derech HaChaim, that he thinks that it's only if you mention Ba'avodah and Shuritzei, but if you mention Moedim, you're not Yotze. Lo Yodati Hominolon, he says, I don't see any reason for that. On the contrary, he takes the view that L'chatchila, of course, he should have gone back to Ritzei and said Ya'aleh V'Yoveh middle of Ritzei. But b'di'evad, if he said Ya'aleh V'Yoveh in middle of Moedim, where we say Al Nisim, so b'di'evad he is Yotze, doesn't need to repeat the Shemona Esrei. So all right, so Baruch Hashem. So now we've So now we've learned a new halacha, and so I'll finish off the shir with this, and wish you all a good revoch and a veilige yankev halach ledarke. Kol tov.
Shkayach.